She's the young activist behind the biggest climate crisis protest movement. She was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize and Time Person of the Year in 2019. You might remember her famous "How dare you" speech, but when was the last time you heard about Greta Thunberg? Maybe it was her tweet in late 2022? Well, actually, she has been arrested for climate protests multiple times in the past couple of years. So why don't we hear as much about her actions anymore? Back then, Greta brought one clear message about the climate crisis: listen to the science. But everything changed when the pandemic hit. The strikes had to go virtual. In these digital meetings, she saw a lot. Fridays for Future started in Europe and was dominated by white people. But now they were listening to activists from all over the world. These people are experiencing the real impacts of the climate crisis today, not in the future. For example, when the homes of activists in the Philippines were hit by a typhoon, many advised them to fill up their bathtubs in case drinking water became hard to access. The thing is, most people in the Philippines don't even have bathtubs. On top of that, tap water in the Philippines isn't safe to drink. This is where Greta became open to the perspectives of her friends worldwide. For instance, she learned that climate protests are easy to do in democratic countries, but activists in more authoritarian countries face unique challenges. Okay, well, what does this have to do with Greta seemingly being away from the spotlight? In short, Greta learned a lot about one concept: climate justice. A concept that ensures the burden of climate change and the fight against it is shared fairly. Simply put, she realized that the climate crisis is not just a scientific issue, but also inseparable from social justice. For example, many small islands in the Pacific Ocean face the threat of sinking due to rising sea levels. Their residents lose their homes, land, and livelihoods, yet their contribution to the climate crisis is very small. Much larger contributions come from the United States and Europe. So, the concept of climate justice demands greater responsibility from the largest emitters. Their responsibility should be proportional to the impact they've caused. This doesn't just apply on a country scale. Shockingly, a mere 57 companies involved in oil, gas, and cement production have directly contributed to 80% of global emissions since 2016. Wealth disparity also affects emissions. Even more shocking, the richest 10% of people in the world are responsible for 50% of consumption emissions. I mean, we often see wealthy people travel by private jet, which emits far more than cars or even public transport. The climate crisis also impacts vulnerable communities more severely. Women in sub-Saharan Africa face increased risk of violence and harassment as they have to walk further for water due to worsening droughts. Indigenous peoples, who protect 80% of the world's biodiversity, risk losing their homes due to droughts, wildfires, and flooding. Outdoor workers are more vulnerable to the effects of air pollution and extreme heat. So, the message is no longer just listen to the science. Greta's climate activism now carries a new message: listen to the most vulnerable. Perhaps because of this change, Greta's activism isn't as noticeable as before. Because compared to just promoting the science, the concept of climate justice is, of course, less popular with those in power and those who are not vulnerable. Now, many experts believe we are facing a polycrisis. Not just the climate, but many interrelated crises. Climate pandemics, inflation, wars, misinformation, racism, political conflicts, housing prices, and many more. Since the crises are interconnected, individual solutions, like reducing personal consumption, don't help much. Hearing this might make us lose spirit. We might feel increasingly helpless due to the complexity of the problems we face. But also, now that we understand the relationships and interconnections between the issues at hand, we might be able to find more appropriate solutions together. So, are you ready to face the polycrisis?